Looks like Prince Harry did some serious damage control as Australia has reversed its verdict to cut funding from the Invictus Games.
Harry loses everything. Finally, the court defeat that has happened recently leaves Prince Harry facing a shocking reality.
I think Meghan understood that the Queen was a very decisive adversary and that Meghan, was not going to be able to run rings around her.
People forget just how complicated Prince Harry was, how demanding. He's very needy. You know, everything revolves around him.
A growing scandal involving Prince Harry and his last remaining genuine charity project, the Invictus Games, brought together 543 wounded military veterans from 23 countries. The total cost 63.2 million Canadian, or approximately $118,352 per competitor.
$118,000 for every veteran involved. A charity budget covered in black bars, so heavily redacted that entire sections are impossible to read. And a London courtroom that looked Prince Harry's legal team straight in the face and delivered a firm answer. No, this wasn't just another difficult week for Harry. This was the kind of week where several major problems seemed to collide all at once, creating headlines from every direction. The timing could hardly have been worse. Legal setbacks, public criticism, growing questions about charity finances, and intense debate across social media all arrived together, turning what might have been a single news story into something much bigger. Let's start with the issue that appears to have hit the hardest. 5 long years. Think about that for a moment.
A battle for years only to lose at the very end. Because that is exactly what has just happened to Prince Harry. And this isn't just another court loss. No, this may be the moment Harry finally realizes that the life he left behind is not waiting for him to come back. It is a true eye-opener for him. Because after years of legal challenges, millions spent on lawyers, countless headlines, and repeated warnings about his family's safety, Prince Harry has officially lost his final appeal against the British government over his security protection. The judges have spoken. The decision stands. And now Harry faces a reality he has been trying to avoid for more than 5 years. Because according to the court, he is no longer entitled to the same level of protection he once received as a senior working royal. And the implications of that is enormous.
5 years of legal battles, countless court appearances, endless headlines, and reportedly millions upon millions spent on lawyers and legal proceedings. Year after year, the case continued moving through the courts. Each stage seemed to build toward one final opportunity, one last appeal, one last chance to secure the outcome Harry had been fighting for since stepping away from royal duties. According to reports, Harry entered this final stage believing there was still a path to victory. He appeared convinced that the security arrangement he wanted could still be restored. For years, this had been one of the central issues in his ongoing disputes. The argument wasn't new, but this was the moment everything came down to a final decision. Then came a quiet Friday morning. No dramatic announcement, no grand public event.
I did a video on a fatwa being put out on Prince Harry because of what he wrote in the book Spare. But nonetheless, they insisted that only official police protection could properly safeguard him and Meghan and the children during their visits to Britain. This is what Harry argued. But now here is the emotional argument that Harry made that resonated with many of his supporters. So during his testimony, Harry described Britain as my home. Now think about that for a moment, okay? Because despite living in California, despite the Netflix documentaries, despite the interviews, despite all the explosive memoir allegations and stories that he told in his book Spare, Harry still considers the United Kingdom his home. And he argued that his children deserve the opportunity to know that part of their heritage comes with certain things that he still wants to rely on as being still legitimate to who he is and who his children are, although he lives in America.
Just a ruling from the judges that effectively ended the fight. The decision was clear. The appeal failed. The automatic taxpayer-funded police protection that Harry once received as a working royal would not be restored. The legal road ended right there. No additional appeal. No next step waiting around the corner. No backup plan inside the courtroom. As far as this case was concerned, the battle was over. But what really caught people's attention wasn't only the decision itself. It was a particular observation from the court that quickly began spreading across newspapers, television broadcasts, and social media platforms around the world. The judge didn't simply reject the appeal. He also highlighted that Harry's frustration and sense of unfairness were not by themselves legal arguments. That comment landed with enormous force because many observers interpreted it.
But then came this statement that made the defining moment of his case really stand out, because Harry said that connection that these children, his children, have to his family they cannot be kept safe if they're not on British soil with this certain kind of security. In other words, he was essentially telling the court that without restored security, bringing Meghan and the children to Britain becomes extremely difficult and perhaps even impossible. Now, for Harry, this wasn't just a legal dispute. It was about family. In a line that is already making headlines around the world, the judge effectively stated that Harry's sense of grievance was not enough to overturn the decision. That sentence alone speaks volumes, because many royal observers believe that the court was sending a message. Being unhappy with an outcome does not mean that the outcome was unlawful. Okay? And that distinction ultimately sealed Harry's fate.
As the court drawing a sharp line between emotion and evidence. In other words, someone can feel deeply disappointed. Someone can genuinely believe they have been treated unfairly. But feelings alone do not determine legal outcomes. Courts require evidence, rules, and legal standards. Public sympathy and personal frustration are not enough to change the result. That single point sparked countless discussions online. Supporters and critics immediately began debating what it meant and whether it reflected broader questions about Harry's long-running disputes with institutions he once belonged to. Then there was another detail that left many people stunned.
I don't think a lot of veterans actually are devastated. The reality is, if you go deeper into Invictus, a lot of veterans are actually more upset, asking where all the money actually goes to and how they're playing with the veteran money, because they're getting a lot of funding from countries and places to get this, what would typically be veteran support income, that then goes to putting on the Invictus Games. Now, again, I'm not trying to be, belittling what the Invictus Games is trying to do, but I am asking the question of, is it really the best use of veteran funding? Why can't Harry get his own funding? Why is he relying on all these countries to do it?
Harry wasn't even there when the final ruling arrived. After years of attending hearings, making appearances, speaking publicly about his concerns, and being photographed outside court buildings, the moment that ultimately decided everything happened while he was thousands of miles away. The judgment was delivered without him present. For many observers, that fact became almost as talked about as the ruling itself. And according to many public reactions, people were not exactly holding back. One person summed up their feelings with the blunt statement, "No finally means no." Another comment quickly gained attention online. "You don't quit the job and then act shocked when they come for the company car." Whether people agreed or disagreed with those remarks, they reflected a growing sentiment among critics who believed the outcome was inevitable from the beginning. So why did Harry believe the appeal could still succeed? That's where the story becomes even more complicated. During the legal process, Harry described Britain as my home. Those words caught attention because they revealed something deeper than a dispute over security arrangements. Despite life in California, despite major media deals, despite years of distance from royal duties, Britain still appeared to hold enormous personal significance for him. He argued that his children deserve the opportunity to understand their heritage and know the country where their family history is rooted. That point became a major part of the discussion surrounding the case. Then came the argument that many viewed as the foundation of the entire appeal. Harry maintained that his children could not safely visit Britain without receiving the specific level of protection he was requesting. If that protection wasn't available, then visits could become extremely difficult or potentially impossible. When viewed from that perspective, the case seemed larger than a disagreement about security officers. For Harry, supporters argued it was about family connections, heritage, and future visits. For critics, it was about accepting the consequences that came with stepping away from an official role. The court's decision effectively left that debate unresolved, while making one thing clear: the requested arrangement would not be returning. Yet while news organizations focused intensely on the courtroom drama, another story was quietly gaining momentum behind the scenes. Questions were emerging around several charitable organizations connected to Harry's public work, and one issue in particular centered on veterans. The number that caught attention was staggering. Reports surrounding the 2025 Invictus Games placed costs at approximately $63 million for 543 competitors. Once people started doing the math, the figure worked out to roughly $118,000 per participant. That number immediately triggered a wave of questions. People wanted explanations. They wanted details. They wanted breakdowns showing where the money had been allocated. The figure sounded so large that many observers struggled to understand how costs could reach that level. The scrutiny intensified because some reports claimed participants covered significant personal expenses themselves, including travel, accommodations, and other related costs. Some commentators even alleged that competitors faced additional expenses simply to participate. If those claims were accurate, critics asked an obvious question. If veterans were paying substantial portions of their own costs, what exactly accounted for the remaining tens of millions of dollars? That question fueled even more attention when discussions turned toward financial documents and budget records. Observers noted that portions of certain budget materials appeared heavily redacted. Entire sections were obscured. Key details were unavailable for public review. Naturally, that only increased speculation and public curiosity. One commentator asked, "What could a veterans charity possibly need to hide?" Another pointed to reports that nearly $30 million allegedly came from Canadian taxpayers and argued that citizens deserved greater transparency regarding how those funds were used. As the discussion continued, comparisons began appearing that resonated strongly with the public. Many people started comparing the Invictus Games with the American Warrior Games. Both focus on supporting wounded veterans through athletic competition. Both promote resilience, recovery, and achievement. Yet according to figures widely discussed online, the American Warrior Games reportedly operate with a budget of around $2 million annually. That comparison became impossible for many people to ignore. On one side stood a reported $63 million operation. On the other stood a program reportedly functioning at a fraction of that cost. Similar goals, similar mission, similar focus on veterans, yet vastly different financial figures. And once those numbers entered the public conversation, the questions only grew louder. More people began examining the budgets. More commentators started discussing transparency. More critics demanded detailed explanations. And the comparison between a reported $2 million program and a reported $63 million event continued spreading across headlines, broadcasts, online discussions, and public debates, raising even more questions about how two organizations pursuing such similar purposes could end up carrying price tags that appeared worlds apart. What really caught people's attention wasn't just the size of the budget. It was the questions ordinary viewers started asking once they looked beyond the headlines and began doing the math for themselves. the audience looked at those massive figures and immediately focused on something much more personal. They started wondering what that kind of money could have done if it had been directed straight toward the veterans themselves. Could those funds have helped provide advanced prosthetic limbs? Could they have paid for wheelchair-accessible homes? Could they have purchased specially adapted vehicles that injured veterans could comfortably and independently drive every day? Those aren't small things. Those are life-changing things. For many people following the story, that became the central issue. Instead of seeing tens of millions spent on a large international event, they imagined thousands of veterans receiving direct support that could improve their daily lives for years. Right or wrong, that comparison kept coming up again and again, and it fueled even more debate across social media and comment sections. But this story doesn't stop at budget questions. In fact, this is where many observers believe it starts becoming genuinely confusing, because one government had already appeared ready to move on from the project altogether. Australia cut its funding, finished, gone. No more government support. At least that's how it looked at the time. The decision appeared final, and many people assumed the conversation was over. Yet what happened next left critics and commentators scratching their heads. Suddenly, the funding was back. Not for a few months. Not as a temporary extension. Reports indicated that support was restored for another 3 years. Just like that, the money was flowing again, and people immediately wanted answers. The official explanation pointed to feedback from veterans and concerns raised within the community. But that explanation didn't satisfy everyone. In fact, it created even more questions. One widely shared comment summed up the skepticism perfectly. There are tens of thousands of veterans across Australia. Did a few dozen voices really convince an entire government to reverse course? Whether that's a fair criticism or not, it reflects the mood that many observers have adopted. The reversal seemed abrupt. The explanation felt incomplete to some people. And because there weren't many detailed public answers, speculation rushed in to fill the gap. Another commenter didn't hold back, saying, "Australia now looks foolish." Again, that's an opinion, not a proven fact, but it shows how frustrated portions of the audience have become. Many feel like they're hearing one version of events while seeing something very different unfold in front of them. That disconnect has only deepened public suspicion. By this stage, many critics had stopped asking polite questions and started demanding something much bigger. Calls for a full independent audit began growing louder. Online discussions became increasingly heated. Some critics even started using the nickname Invictus, a play on words that quickly spread through comment sections and discussion forums. And once that nickname started circulating, the criticism intensified even further. People began throwing around serious accusations and dramatic claims. Whether those claims are justified or not, the reality is that public frustration has reached a level where many individuals are openly questioning leadership, management, and accountability. At the same time, another idea started gaining traction. If confidence in the current leadership continues to weaken, some commentators argue that perhaps the organization should eventually look toward a different public figure as patron. One name that repeatedly appears in those conversations is Mike Tindall. Whether that would ever happen is another question entirely, but the fact that people are discussing alternatives at all says a lot about the current atmosphere. Yet if the budget controversy sounds troubling, the next issue is even more serious, because the next charity discussion isn't centered on financial questions. It's centered on allegations that have generated concern among human rights organizations and advocacy groups. For 6 years, Harry served as president of African Parks, an organization that manages protected conservation areas across numerous African nations. Then, in 2023, he transitioned to a position on the board. That timing has become a major focus of public discussion. Critics point out that this move occurred around the same period that allegations connected to the organization were receiving greater public attention. As a result, some observers have questioned whether leadership should have responded more visibly and more forcefully as concerns emerged. One of the organizations that has spoken publicly is Survival International, a group that advocates for Indigenous rights. The organization has called for Harry to step down, citing allegations involving members of the Baka community in the Republic of Congo. The allegations themselves are deeply troubling. Reports have included claims of serious mistreatment and human rights abuses allegedly carried out by individuals connected to conservation enforcement efforts. These allegations attracted significant international attention and prompted widespread concern. In response, African Parks commissioned an external legal review. Later, the organization acknowledged that abuses had occurred and publicly expressed regret regarding the suffering that had been caused. But the controversy did not end there. According to continuing statements from advocacy groups, concerns remain about conditions on the ground and whether meaningful changes have been fully implemented. Some community representatives have continued speaking out, describing ongoing fears and tensions. That is why this issue continues to follow the organization. And throughout all of this, one question keeps resurfacing among critics. If someone serves in a leadership position and becomes aware of serious allegations, what responsibility do they carry to speak publicly, push for change, or distance themselves if those problems persist? So far, that debate remains unresolved. Critics continue asking questions. Supporters continue defending the work being done. And Harry has found himself facing scrutiny from multiple directions at the same time, which brings the conversation back to the pattern that one particularly observant viewer pointed out earlier. Invictus, African Parks, Centrebal, 3 separate charities, 3 separate controversies. And for many people watching from the outside, that growing list is exactly what keeps drawing attention back to the larger story. By the time people reach this point, one comment seemed to pull everything together into a single question that spread across discussion boards, social media pages, and comment sections everywhere. One viewer laid all 3 organizations side by side and asked, "What do these 3 have in common?" Then they answered their own question with one word: Centrebal. That observation stuck because, in the minds of many critics, it connected several separate controversies into one larger story. Centrebal, the charity Harry co-founded in honor of his late mother, had already experienced its own highly public internal dispute. Reports emerged of disagreements behind the scenes, concerns about leadership, and questions about financial management. Whether those concerns ultimately proved significant or not, the public fallout was impossible to ignore. What was once viewed almost entirely through a charitable lens suddenly became the subject of heated public debate. Then people started lining up the other organizations alongside it. African Parks was facing ongoing scrutiny connected to allegations of serious misconduct and abuse. Invictus was being questioned over spending figures and transparency concerns. Centrebal was dealing with its own internal controversy. Suddenly, critics weren't looking at one story, they were looking at 3. And fair or unfair, that's where a new narrative began taking hold. Across countless online discussions, some people started referring to these organizations as personal piggy banks. They pointed to flights, security arrangements, accommodations, consultants, staff costs, and other operational expenses. Then they asked whether too much money was being spent around the edges instead of directly supporting the causes these organizations were established to help. Now, it's important to remember that criticism is not proof, and speculation is not evidence. But public perception doesn't always wait for final answers. Once a narrative gains momentum, it can become incredibly difficult to stop. And right now, for many observers, that narrative has become the lens through which they view almost every headline connected to Harry and Meghan. That's the key point. Whether the criticism is justified or not, a large portion of the audience is no longer looking at each story individually. They're connecting dots, they're comparing headlines, they're revisiting old stories, they're stacking one controversy on top of another, and asking whether there's a larger pattern underneath it all. And once people start looking through that lens, something interesting happens. The old questions come rushing back. Not the questions from last month, not the questions from last year, the questions that have been hanging around for years and never completely disappeared. For many critics, the charity controversies are only the latest chapter in a much longer saga. The discussion quickly circles back to Queen Elizabeth II. Years after her passing, many people are still talking about reports that Harry and Meghan were invited to Balmoral while the Queen's health was declining. Stories circulated claiming that arrangements had been made, rooms prepared, and opportunities offered for family visits. Whether every detail of those reports is accurate or not, the public conversation surrounding them has never really faded. People continue debating what happened. They continue asking difficult questions. They continue wondering whether family relationships could have been handled differently during those final years. Some comments remain especially emotional. Critics often point to images of the Queen carrying out official duties despite appearing increasingly frail. They remember seeing her continue to meet political leaders, greet visitors, and fulfill her responsibilities almost until the very end. Then they ask questions that still generate passionate reactions. Did they realize how ill she was? And if they did, why wasn't more time spent together? Those questions continue appearing because the Queen remains an enormously respected figure to many people. Any discussion connected to her final years naturally carries strong emotions, and that's why this topic remains one of the most sensitive parts of the entire conversation. Then, almost without warning, the focus shifts from royal history to business ventures. That discussion has become a source of endless online jokes. People frequently poke fun at products associated with Meghan's lifestyle brand. Luxury items, premium pricing, specialty products, and limited collections have all become targets for internet humor. One example continues getting brought up repeatedly. A candle-related product with a price tag that many people considered unusually high quickly became the subject of memes and sarcastic posts. Social media users couldn't resist making jokes, especially when discussions centered around candles and accessories. The internet immediately jumped on one question: why would someone need matches for a candle without a wick? That joke spread everywhere. People shared screenshots, created memes, and posted humorous reactions. For many observers, it became one of those internet moments that simply refuses to disappear. But underneath the laughter sits a more serious criticism. Some observers argue that luxury branding only works when customers clearly understand what makes a product worth its premium price. Critics claim that many offerings seem disconnected from everyday consumers. Supporters argue the exact opposite, saying luxury products aren't designed to appeal to everyone and never have been. Either way, the debate continues generating attention. Then comes the subject that perhaps sparks more speculation than almost any other. Questions surrounding Archie's birth continue to circulate in certain online communities years after the original announcements. Various claims, disputed theories, interpretations of public records, and discussions about timelines continue appearing online. Some people point to details they believe deserve clarification. Others argue that all necessary information was provided long ago and that the continued speculation serves no purpose. The reality is that many of these claims remain unverified and heavily disputed. But the reason people keep talking about them is surprisingly simple. People often struggle to let go of questions they feel have never been fully answered. Whether those questions are important or not becomes almost secondary. The uncertainty itself keeps the discussion alive. And that's exactly what continues happening here. 5 years after Harry stepped away from royal duties, the debates haven't disappeared. In fact, many of them seem larger than ever. Every new headline revives an older argument. Every controversy reopens previous discussions. Every public appearance generates another round of analysis and commentary. For critics, the list of unanswered questions keeps growing. For supporters, much of the criticism feels repetitive and unfair. But regardless of which side people fall on, one thing is impossible to deny. The public fascination hasn't gone away. If anything, it's intensified. 5 years after walking away, Britain still talks about him. The media still follows him. Comment sections still debate him. And every new development seems to create another wave of discussion. These questions aren't fading into the background. They're multiplying, evolving, and generating new conversations every time another headline appears. If you want to see just how deep this story goes, check out the videos on your screen right now. They break down the biggest controversies, the biggest claims, and the biggest questions that people are still debating today. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And let us know your thoughts below, because this story continues to spark debate everywhere people are talking.